And one more, the Playboy Jazz Festival season kicked off featuring the Johnny Crawford Orchestra.
Our guest today stars as one of the most iconic TV shows in history as Mark McCain.
For millions of Americans, Johnny Crawford was the boy who seemed to have it all. By 13, he was an Emmy-nominated television star. Before he was old enough to vote, he was a charting recording artist and one of the most recognizable young faces in America. His future appeared limitless. But when the spotlight of childhood fame began to fade, Crawford found himself thrust into a brutal cycle of career rejection, financial instability, and personal heartbreak that would follow him for decades. To make matters worse, a devastating health battle slowly stole the very thing that had made him famous. As his condition worsened, so did the financial burden, leaving his family facing struggles that a star of his stature should never have endured. The final days and death of Johnny Crawford are extremely heart-wrenching, and when you discover the tragic details of what happened behind the scenes, you'll never remember him the same way. The meteoric rise of Johnny Crawford. Johnny Crawford was only 13 years old when he began standing alongside some of the most respected performers of his generation. He won the hearts of millions as a boy, growing up in the Old West, and launched a music career that would put him on the Billboard charts. His future seemed limitless, but the same industry that lifted him so high would eventually forget his name, and the final chapter of his life would be a tragedy that no one could have predicted. John Ernest Crawford was born on March 26, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, into a family that seemed destined to produce artists. His mother, Betty, was an accomplished pianist who could play anything from classical concertos to popular standards. His father, Robert Sr., worked as an editor, shaping the words of others while dreaming of a different path for his son. His maternal grandfather, Alfred Megerlin, was a world-class violinist who had served as the first concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic, one of the most prestigious positions in American classical music. Music and performance were in Johnny's blood long before he ever stepped in front of a camera. At just 9 years old, in 1955, Johnny secured a spot as one of the original 24 Mouseketeers on the debut season of Disney's The Mickey Mouse Club. It was the dream job for any child in America, a chance to be part of something magical that would be watched by millions of families every day. Johnny was talented, charming, and good-looking, everything that Disney was looking for in a young performer. But the triumph was short-lived. At the end of the first season, he was fired. The reason was painful for any child to hear. He could not learn the complex dance steps quickly enough, and the choreographers decided that he was holding back the other performers. The rejection stung, but Johnny did not let it break him. He went back to work, securing minor guest roles on early anthology programs like The Loretta Young Show and The Millionaire. These were not glamorous parts. He played small characters, sometimes with only a few lines, sometimes with no lines at all. But the work kept him in the industry and helped his family pay the bills. Then came 1958. Out of hundreds of child actors competing for a single part, Johnny's expressive face and natural emotional vulnerability won him the definitive role of Mark McCain on the ABC Western series The Rifleman. The show was built around the relationship between a widowed homesteader named Lucas McCain, played by Chuck Connors, and his young son, Mark. The chemistry between the two actors was immediate and undeniable. Viewers did not have to pretend that Johnny and Chuck were father and son. They believed it because the connection was real. In 1959, at the mere age of 13, Johnny achieved a historic career pinnacle. He earned a Primetime Emmy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Dramatic Series. To put that in perspective, A child actor was being recognized alongside adults who had been working in the industry for decades. He did not win the award, but the nomination itself was a validation of everything he had worked for since being fired from the Mickey Mouse Club. The bond between Johnny and Chuck Connors was not just for the cameras. Off-screen, Connors became an absolute father figure and protector to the young actor. He took Johnny out to dinners, mentored him on adult life, and fiercely shielded him from the typical Hollywood exploitation that destroyed so many child stars. Connors had been a professional athlete before he became an actor, and he understood the value of discipline and loyalty. He treated Johnny like a son, not like a co-star, and Johnny never forgot that kindness. To truly embody his Western persona, Johnny underwent rigorous, physically demanding training from real-world cowboys. He learned to ride horses with the confidence of a man who had grown up in the saddle. He became an incredibly skilled competitive trick roper, able to perform advanced lariat maneuvers like the flat loop and the butterfly under the guidance of Hollywood horse wrangler Buster Trow. While all of this was happening, Johnny simultaneously launched a highly successful pop recording career with Delphi Records. Between 1961 and 1964, he achieved several separate top 40 hits on the Billboard Hot 100, including his signature track, Cindy's Birthday, which peaked at an impressive number 8 in 1962. He was a television star, a recording artist, and a teenage heartthrob all at once. His future seemed limitless. But behind the awards and the hit records, Johnny Crawford was already facing battles that no one could see. The same industry that had lifted him so high was about to discard him, and the years that followed would test every ounce of his resilience. The brutal personal struggles of Johnny Crawford. In 1963, the exact year the Rifleman ceased production, the 17-year-old Crawford collided with a harsh industry barrier that he had not seen coming. He had physically outgrown the wide-eyed, endearing child aesthetic that had made him famous. The boy who had played Mark McCain was now a young man with broader shoulders, a deeper voice, and the kind of face that no longer fit the roles he had once dominated. But casting directors flatly refused to see him as a mature, commanding romantic lead. They looked at him and saw a child actor who had aged out of his usefulness. The roles that had come easily when he was 13 were no longer available, and the roles that he was now eligible for went to other actors. The financial situation was even worse than the professional rejection. Because The Rifleman was produced during an era of predatory early network contracts, Crawford's union agreements guaranteed him absolutely zero financial residual payments for future reruns. The show that had made him famous, that had earned him an Emmy nomination at 13, that had been sold into syndication around the world and would continue airing in dozens of countries for decades, generated not a single dollar of back-end profit for the actor who had helped make it successful. As the show entered decades of highly lucrative continuous global syndication, Crawford did not receive a dime of those profits. The network executives and production companies got rich, while Crawford struggled to pay his rent. The psychological toll of severe typecasting proved to be just as damaging as the financial strain. For the next 2 decades, his iconic association with the character of Mark McCain systematically hurt his adult career. Mainstream Hollywood casting offices explicitly pigeonholed him, routinely rejecting him for contemporary gritty dramas or comedies because they believed audiences would only ever see him as the little boy from the Western. He was not being judged on his talent or his range. He was being judged on a role he had played as a child, and no amount of auditioning could make the casting directors see him differently. Starved for meaningful work, his once glorious resume deteriorated into a string of fleeting, one-off episodic guest spots on shows like Little House on the Prairie and Murder, she wrote. These were not the roles he had dreamed of as a teenager. They were scraps, thrown to an actor who was no longer considered relevant. The constant daily rejection at auditions took a toll that no one outside the industry could understand. He was forced to rely heavily on regional nostalgia conventions just to maintain a shred of professional dignity and income, signing autographs for fans who remembered him as the boy from The Rifleman, while he tried not to think about what might have been. The personal side of his life was no less painful. During his peak fame at Hollywood High School, he fell deeply in love with a fellow student from South Dakota named Charlotte McKenna. She was not part of the entertainment industry, which was part of her appeal. She saw him as Johnny, not as Mark McCain. But the punishing, round-the-clock schedules of his music recordings and studio demands created immense personal friction. He was constantly working, constantly traveling, and constantly being pulled in directions that took him away from her. The relationship, which had started with so much promise, ended in a complete and painful breakup upon graduation. They went their separate ways, and Johnny spent years wondering what might have been. Following the split, the two completely lost touch and lived entirely separate lives across different states for 25 years. Johnny navigated his turbulent young adulthood and shifting career completely absent of the one woman he considered his true soulmate. He dated other people. He had other relationships, but none of them filled the hole that Charlotte had left behind. The two miraculously reconnected in 1990 and married in 1995, a reunion that seemed like the ending of a Hollywood movie. But even that happiness was tested. During the 2000s, rumors spread that they had experienced a long, unpublicized physical separation, where Crawford lived entirely alone in Los Angeles. The tabloids printed stories that his marriage had permanently failed. Whether those rumors were true or not, they added another layer of pain to a life already filled with disappointment. In 1990, driven by a deep passion for musical preservation, Crawford founded the Johnny Crawford Dance Orchestra, a big band jazz group dedicated to authentic 1920s swing arrangements. The orchestra was his passion project, a way to connect with the music that had filled his grandfather's violin concerts. But because he lacked corporate backing, Crawford poured vast amounts of his own rapidly dwindling personal savings into the project. He purchased original vintage sheet music at collectors' prices. He self-funded the salaries of up to 16 professional musicians. The orchestra was a beautiful artistic achievement and a massive financial burden. The creative outlet that should have brought him joy was slowly draining his bank account dry. The struggles that Johnny Crawford faced in the decades after The Rifleman would have broken a lesser man. But the typecasting, the financial strain, the lost love, and the musical burden were preparing him for a challenge far greater than anything he had faced before. The cruel diagnosis that changed everything. In the mid-2010s, friends and musicians within Johnny Crawford's dance orchestra began noticing highly alarming changes in the man they had performed with for years. Johnny Crawford had always possessed an absolute encyclopedic memory for complex 1920s musical charts and silent film history. He could recall the name of a song from 1927, the key it was written in, and the names of the musicians who had first recorded it, all without a moment's hesitation. But now, something was wrong. He began forgetting lyrics on stage, staring blankly at the microphone while the band played on. He struggled to find basic words during live performances, stumbling over phrases that had once come to him as naturally as breathing. The musicians looked at each other with worry in their eyes. They knew something was happening to their leader, but no one wanted to say it out loud. After years of private medical evaluations and mounting cognitive issues, his official legacy team and the television network MeTV made a devastating public announcement in 2019. Johnny Crawford had been formally diagnosed with severe, irreversible Alzheimer's disease. The news landed like a physical blow to the fans who had followed his career for 6 decades. The boy who had captured their hearts on the Rifleman, the teenager who had topped the Billboard charts, the man who had kept the music of the 1920s alive through his orchestra, was slowly losing his mind to a disease that had no cure and no mercy. The aggressive neurodegenerative progression of Alzheimer's attacked Crawford's brain with a speed that shocked his doctors. The man who had once delivered nuanced, emotionally complex performances on national television suffered a near-total loss of speech. He became entirely unable to construct full sentences or articulate basic thoughts to his loved ones. The words that had been his livelihood, his scripts, his song lyrics, and his conversations with fans, all of it drained away like water through a cracked vessel. He could still smile. He could still recognize faces, at least for a while. But he could not tell his wife that he loved her in a sentence that made sense. The cognitive decline completely destroyed his ability to perform. The man who had poured his personal savings into keeping the music alive could no longer lead his beloved musicians. He could not remember the songs. He could not keep time. He could not stand at the podium and guide the band through a single number. He also could no longer attend the fan conventions that had been his emotional lifeline for decades. The gatherings where people remembered him not as a failed actor, but as a beloved part of their childhoods. The disease forced him into immediate, total isolation from the public eye. As his disorientation turned into a profound safety risk, his family faced an impossible decision. They could no longer manage his intensive physical needs at home. He had wandered away from the house on more than one occasion, confused and frightened, unable to remember where he lived or how to get back. The risk of him hurting himself or wandering into traffic was too great. He was permanently moved out of his residence and placed into a specialized, high-security, full-time memory care facility in Los Angeles. The facility was clean and well-staffed, but it was not home. It was a place where people went when their families could no longer take care of them, and the hallways were filled with the quiet tragedy of minds that had forgotten how to be minds. The former child star who had been nominated for an Emmy at 13, who had performed for millions of fans around the world, who had kept the music of a bygone era alive through sheer force of will, now spent his days in a locked facility, cared for by nurses who did not know that he had once been famous. The man who had ridden horses and thrown trick ropes on national television could no longer tie his own shoes. The singer who had reached number 8 on the Billboard charts could no longer remember the words to his own songs. The disease had stripped him of everything except his beating heart and his breathing lungs. And the worst part was that he knew it, at least in the beginning. He knew what was happening to him, and he was powerless to stop it. The diagnosis changed everything, not just for Johnny, but for the people who loved him. His fans, who had grown up with him, now read updates about his decline with tears in their eyes. The cruel irony of Alzheimer's is that it does not kill the body quickly. It kills the person slowly, over years, while the body continues to breathe. Johnny Crawford was still alive, but the man he had been was already gone. And soon, the financial reality set in. The final days of Johnny Crawford. Despite a lifetime spent in the entertainment industry, Crawford's modest net worth, estimated at roughly $500,000, was completely obliterated in a matter of months by the staggering astronomical costs of around-the-clock specialized memory care and medical fees. The same industry that had made him famous, that had profited from his image and his talent for decades, offered him nothing. No pension, no health benefits, no assistance of any kind. The money he had managed to save over a lifetime of work vanished into the maw of nursing home bills and doctor visits. His family watched their savings drain away with nothing to stop the drain. With the family facing imminent financial ruin and a total lack of institutional support from major Hollywood studios, his lifelong friend Paul Peterson stepped in to help. Peterson, a former child star of The Donna Reed Show, had founded a child actor advocacy group called A Minor Consideration. He had dedicated his life to protecting young performers from the ills of the industry that had chewed him up and spit him out. Now he was facing the worst case he had ever seen. An Emmy-nominated actor, a man who had helped build the success of a show that was still airing in syndication around the world, could not afford to pay for his own basic care. Peterson reportedly launched a public GoFundMe campaign to crowdsource the money required to pay for Crawford's monthly care facility bills. The response from fans was immediate and emotional. People who had grown up watching The Rifleman opened their wallets and donated what they could. Some gave $5, some gave $500. The donations came in from all over the world, from people who had never met Johnny Crawford, but who felt that they knew him. The campaign raised enough money to keep him in his facility, to ensure that he had a bed and food and the medical attention he needed. But it was not enough to make him comfortable. It was just enough to keep him alive. The financial desperation grew so severe that fans and historical preservationists had to organize a formal benefit and silent auction at the historic Joel and Frances McRae Ranch to secure emergency cash for his medical survival. People who had never met Crawford, who had no connection to him other than their love for the show he had starred in as a child, spent their time organizing an event to save his life. The irony was not lost on anyone. An industry that generated billions of dollars in revenue could not be bothered to take care of one of its own. It took a group of strangers passing a hat to keep Johnny Crawford from dying in a county facility. The hardships Crawford faced later in life drew public attention to a long-standing problem. Many of the industry's earliest child stars were never given the financial protections needed to support them in the years after fame faded. He was not an isolated case. He was one of hundreds of former child actors who had been used up and thrown away by an industry that saw them as products rather than people. But his case was particularly painful because of who he was. An Emmy-nominated icon, a man whose face had been in living rooms across America for decades, was entirely dependent on the charity of strangers just to survive his final years. The studios that had made millions from the Rifleman reruns offered nothing. The networks that had sold advertising time against his image offered nothing. The unions that had collected his dues offered nothing. Only the fans showed up. Only the fans cared. The financial fight consumed the final years of his life. His family spent so much time raising money. His friends spent more time organizing benefits than they spent reminiscing about the good old days. The disease had taken his mind. The industry had taken his money. And now, all that was left was the slow, painful process of saying goodbye. The tragic death of Johnny Crawford. When the global pandemic struck in 2020, Crawford was completely trapped inside his memory care facility under strict quarantine rules. The same facility that had been keeping him safe from accidentally hurting himself was now keeping him safe from a deadly virus. But the safety came at a terrible cost. He was completely cut off from any direct, physical, comforting touch from his visitors. His wife, Charlotte, could not hold his hand without excessive precautions. He was mostly alone in a room with nurses who wore masks and shields, their faces hidden and their voices muffled. He did not understand why the people he loved were not coming to see him as frequently. He could not remember that there was a global pandemic. Despite all of the facility's safety measures, Crawford caught the infection anyway. The virus found its way into his room, and his body, already weakened by years of Alzheimer's decline, had to fight for its life. His body initially managed to clear the primary infection, which was a small miracle. But the illness had done permanent damage. It ravaged his already frail respiratory system and broke whatever physical strength he had managed to preserve. He was not the same after the virus. He was thinner, he was weaker, and he could barely lift his head from the pillow. In his severely weakened post-infection state, Crawford immediately contracted a secondary case of pneumonia. This was not the mild kind of pneumonia that healthy people recover from in a week. This was an aggressive, fast-moving infection that attacked his lungs that had already been battered. His compromised lungs simply could not fight off another invader. As his organs began to fail, he was rushed from his memory care center to a skilled nursing facility, the kind of place where people go when they need more medical attention than a standard care home can provide. But even that was not enough. He was moved one final time to a smaller specialized care home in Los Angeles, chosen because it was as close as possible to his wife's residence. Charlotte wanted to be near him. She wanted to hold his hand. She wanted to be there when he took his last breath. On Thursday, April 29, 2021, Johnny Crawford took his final breath at the age of 75. He died quietly and peacefully, in a small room with soft lighting and the sound of medical equipment beeping in the background. His devoted wife, Charlotte, held his hand continuously until the very end. The cruel global pandemic rules meant that even in death, the family could not gather as they wanted. Because of the severe quarantine mandates strictly enforced at the time, visitors were barred from entering his room during his final days. Johnny Crawford's death was one of thousands, but for the people who loved him, it was the only one that mattered. Following his passing, his body was cremated. His ashes were permanently interred at Sunset Hills Memorial Park in Apple Valley, San Bernardino County, California. The cemetery is quiet and peaceful, the kind of place where visitors can sit on a bench and remember the people they have lost. There is no grand monument, towering statue, or elaborate fountain marking his grave. Just a simple marker, a piece of stone, and the memory of a boy who had once made the world fall in love with him. He was officially survived by his wife, Charlotte Samko, his two stepdaughters, Brenda and Jamie, his older actor brother, Robert Crawford Jr., and his sister, Nance. His brother, Robert, had also been a child actor, and the two of them had shared the unique experience of growing up in the spotlight. They understood each other in a way that outsiders never could. When Johnny died, Robert lost not just a brother, but the only person who truly knew what his childhood had been like. Following the news of his death, global tributes poured in from thousands of multi-generational fans and contemporary Western historians. They praised him not only for his acting and his music, but also for his character. Even when the horrors of Alzheimer's had stolen everything else, even when he could no longer speak or feed himself or remember his own name, he still had that trademark gentle sparkle in his eyes. The disease that had stolen his mind could not steal his legacy. The industry that had abandoned him could not erase the memories he had given to millions. Johnny Crawford was gone, but the boy from the Rifleman would live forever in the black and white images that still flickered across television screens late at night. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.